Can you hear me now? Yeah? Okay, wonderful. Baruch Hashem. I'm trying to use the computer for the first time in this challenging times, and we bought a computer very much against my wishes, my educational wishes. But the kids are all learning online, so that's all we had to do. Okay, Baruchim Habayim. So this is a special talk in honor of Yom Haatzmaut. I planned to give it yesterday, Baruch Hashem, with all the great joy and simcha that was taking place in Yeshiva, so we missed the opportunity. But Baruch Hashem, for many people here who are listening, it's in America, so it's still Yom Haatzmaut. So Baruch, and even in England, actually, it's still Yom Haatzmaut. So we're zochet to do it bo biyomo. So my goal of this talk is twofold. One part of it is to give a history of the days with a light on the hashgacha pratis that took place, illuminating all the miracles that took place in the War of Independence. That's the first part. And then the second part is to bring an idea which is rooted in deeper sources. Some people are aware of it, some people it's not so well known, but it gives a light on the hashgacha pratis that took place in a much deeper way than is otherwise regularly known. So starting with the history aspect of it, and we're going to give out messages and avodas Hashem that come through along the way. So we're right now in Tafshin Pei, and I'm going back in history 100 years, exactly 100 years, although Tammuz of that year, Taf Reish Pei, 100 years ago. That was the year when England had shed great light on the Zionist movement, and they decided, at that point Britain were in favor of Eretz Yisrael for the Jews, and they were so in favor that they appointed a high commissioner who was Jewish and Zionist by the name of Herbert Samuel to be in Eretz Yisrael, and they opened the doors wide. The doors were wide open, and anyone who wished to come was given a permit. Jews were able to come en masse. And the reason why this was given was a great impassioned plea on behalf of the Zionist movement to Britain. One of the people who were a major factor in pushing for it was Rav Kook. Rav Kook was left Eretz Yisrael for the conference that was supposed to take place pre-World War I of rabbis, and he was stuck in Europe and was not able to get back to Eretz Yisrael, and he found himself in Ashkocha in England, where he became close friends of my great-grandfather, Rav Tzvi Hashvaber. And when he found himself in England, initially he was upset. What am I doing here? This isn't the place I need to be. I need to be back home in Eretz Yisrael. But he later saw it as a great act of Hashkocha Pratis that HaKadosh Baruch Hu enabled him to be there in England at the time of the declaration of declaring that Eretz Yisrael will be for the Jews. And it was not a simple thing. There were many people, even within the Jewish camp, who were against that movement. There were on the one hand the Reform who were against it, who were saying that we want to integrate amongst the Jews, amongst the British. And there was also the ultra-Orthodox from the other perspective who were just scared. They didn't want to rock the boat with living in England. They were concerned that would cause negative feedback. So they also denounced the idea. And when Rav Kook stood up, and he stood in the British Parliament, and he said an impassioned plea about Eretz Yisrael returning to the Jews, then the British said, who is the most authentic representation of who the Jewish people are represented by? And they said it was Rav Kook, and they accepted his words, and they continued to go through with the plan. So exactly 100 years ago, Herbert Samuels arrived. Now here came something which was very unfortunate. The doors were wide open, and a message was sent out across the globe in the year 1920, we're talking about now, that any Jew who wishes to return is able to return. And the people didn't come. Individuals came, but the masses of people didn't come. And one man who was most instrumental in enabling the whole vision to take place, who was also the first president of the state of Israel, he was Dr. Chaim Weizmann. He was living in England at the time, and he was approached by Winston Churchill, who said to him, where are the Jews? Where are the Jews? You've been praying for 2,000 years to return to your land, and now we have given you the opportunity. Where are the Jews? And he was embarrassed and ashamed that he had nothing to answer. And he turned to the Jews and he wrote a letter, an open letter to the all-world jury, and spoke about this very embarrassing moment that took place. In fact, he was echoing the same sentiment that the Kuzari writes. In the Kuzari, the Melech Kuzar speaks to the Jew and says to him, you daven for Yerushalaim, why are you going back? And he also was speechless He didn't have an explanation of why he was going back, and he said it's the Jewish people's great shame. And there's a rule that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu opens an opportunity, and that opportunity is to be taken by the Jewish people, if they don't take it, Hashem's plan will still take place, but instead of taking place b'ne'imus, in a pleasant way, in a joyful way, then Chas v'Shalom it takes place in a harsh way. We see an example of that by Yaakov Avinu. The Medrash says by Yaakov Avinu that it's fortunate that Yaakov agreed to go down to the land when his son Yosef sent him all the chariots, because if he would not have gone down at that point, HaKadosh Baruch Hu would have still have taken him down in chains, bound in chains. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu has a plan for how the history of the world needs to take place, Hashem's plan will prevail. He offers the opportunity to us in a pleasant way. He says, here I'm giving it to you, b'ne'imus, take it, I love you, take it in a good way. And if the Jewish people take it in a good way like Yaakov Avinu did, everything will be pleasant, it will come with chariots. If, chas v'shalom, the Jewish people do not take the opportunity in a pleasant way, Hashem's plan will still prevail, but unfortunately in a negative way. So once between the years 1920 and coming up to World War II, even earlier than that, then early 1920 already began a change. When the Jews didn't take it in a pleasant way, then it started in an unpleasant way. The first unpleasant way took place in Russia, and this is what was later known as the Third Aliyah. In Russia, they started, in Ukraine actually, with pogroms that took place, with a fight of communism versus the revolution, and Ukraine forces saw the Jews as responsible for the war, and they went out for pogrom, and over 70,000 Jews were killed in that pogrom. And when that took place, the Jewish people recognized the wake-up call, and they decided to do one of three things. Some of the Jews denounced their Judaism, and they said, we're loyal communists, and if that means that we have to give up Judaism, we'll give it up. And that was the saddest of all. The second group said, we'll move to America. There was an en masse emigration to America. And there was a smaller group of the three, the smallest group, who were thousands of Jews, who moved to Eretz Yisrael. And they were the ones who started building kibbutzim and moshavim, and many yeshuvim came out as a result of that third aliyah. That wasn't enough. A few years later in Poland, new laws were enacted which were against Jewish trading. Jews weren't allowed to trade in the country. There were very heavy taxes placed upon them. And the Polish Jewry saw that as a message to move. At that point, America's doors were closed. Jews moved they had nowhere else to go. They left Poland, went to Eretz Yisrael. That was the fourth aliyah. The fifth aliyah was 1933. When Hitler, Yamach Shemo, came into power, the Jews many Jews, not all the Jews unfortunately, but many Jews recognized the time, the opportune moment to leave, and they left in time. 250,000 Jews left then. 250,000 Jews were saved from the Holocaust by leaving then and moving to Israel. Sum total between the third, fourth, and fifth aliyah, 350,000 Jews came to Eretz Yisrael in that window of opportunity that stood open from the British. And then it was closed. Why was it closed? Why did the British close it? The British, who were given a divine shlichut to bring Am Yisrael back to the land, turned their back on that divine shlichut. They rebelled against it. They rebelled against HaKadosh Baruch Hu's mission for them, and they closed the gates. Now, why did they close the gates? They closed the gates because of the Arabs. Each aliyah that came, the Arabs started pogroms against the Jews. Each time the Arabs made a big fuss. And relatively, it wasn't a big fuss. If you look at the numbers there compared to the numbers later, it was very, very small and minute. But the British did what, from an educational perspective, is the biggest mistake you can make. If you're a parent and your child cries and whines and makes a fuss, then the worst thing in the world to do is to say, okay, don't make a fuss, here, I'll give you whatever you want. Because then you teach the child that complaining pays. And if you're a parent and you hold out for a while, but you eventually give in, you're giving the child a terrible message. Because then you're saying, as long as you keep annoying me and keep nagging, eventually I'll give it to you. That teaches the child. That's exactly what the British did. Whenever the Arabs made a fuss, whenever they started a pogrom, the British took away Jewish rights. Instead of taking away Arab rights, they let the Arabs run free and took away Jewish rights. And that way the Arabs learned that violence pays. And they continued with increased violence. So let's just summarize the two messages in Avodat Hashem we've taken so far. Message number one, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will always create his plan to take place in a positive way, in a pleasant way. And if you're open to hear the message, If HaKadosh Baruch Hu shouts out, Mila Hashem Elai, and you step over the line, like Shevet Levi did, then you'll take it in the Imus way, and you'll be given the benefit of being in the Bechor. The Bechor didn't hear that message, they lost the rights. Am Yisrael didn't hear the message, only 350,000 people came, and they only came because of pogroms, and because of financial difficulties, and because of Hitler Yamach Shemo. But they didn't come because of the golden moments, the golden opportunity. So then you, Chas v'Shalom, still fulfill Hashem's plan, but in not a pleasant way. So if you ever hear an opportunity for doing a mitzvah, if you ever see Yad Hashem coming into your life and there's an opportunity, you are given to do positive, good things, take the opportunity while it's still pleasant. Hashem's plan will still take place. It will still come from another place. It doesn't have to come via a negative way, it can come in a positive way. Take the opportunity. That's message number one in Avodat Hashem. Message number two is a chinuch point. A chinuch point that if you see someone is behaving to you in a negative way, you have to let them know, I do not respect or give any credence to that behavior. The British who gave credence to that behavior of the Arabs caused more pogroms, caused more tsaras. And therefore, from a chinuch perspective, you have to respond with negativity, with a clear, solid, that will not pass in my world. It doesn't exist. Maybe I'll hear your inner need. Maybe I'll recognize deeply what you need and I'll give that to you in another way, but not in the way of you complaining or giving violence. That was point number two. Now, the Jews in Eretz Yisrael are in a very negative place. They're in a very difficult position. We skipped a long point of how we got to already the UN agreeing to give Israel a state. But we're now going to give just a fast forward to close to Yom Haatzmaut will take place. And we're going to list a great number of miracles took place, all of which we saw clearly divine hand, the Hashgacha Pratis, the Yad Hashem taking place, all of which were with the Hishtadlus of us in the beginning, with the Mesirus Nefesh the Jewish people put in to begin with. And then after our Mesirus Nefesh, after our elements of Purin, of Hishtadlus we put in, HaKadosh Baruch Hu came toward us, and nace after nace after nace after nace took place. Some more revealed, some more concealed. Number one, in 1947, a year before the state was formed, there was a convention to decide whether it was worthwhile going through with the state. Now, the one people, the one nation who were most, apart from the Arabs, the one nation who were most against the Jewish people having an identity and having a state was Russia. The United States of USSR, Russia, they were killing or sending to Siberia anyone who publicly declared they were Zionistic or Jewish practice. The last people in the world you would think who would come up and would make the declaration of we believe in a Jewish state, what the Zionist enemy, April 1947, the ones who stood up and said we believe there should be a Jewish state, that was Russia. They were the ones who declared in that UN convention there should be a state. Then in order to see if it was viable, they sent a mission to Israel, to Jerusalem, to meet in the King David Hotel. There were two parties supposed to meet. There was the Jewish and the Arabs. And they were both supposed to present their side to the UN committee to see if it's valid, if it's viable. Now, if the Arabs were logical, they would have come forward and said why they think it's impossible. The Arabs didn't come. They decided to boycott the event. And their boycotting the event was purely in our favor. Because then the UN came, they heard Ben Gurion speak, they heard Dr. Chaim Weizmann speak, they heard the entire Jewish presentation as to why it was valid to found a Jewish state in the Jewish homeland, and there was no other voice. They said, okay, we're going ahead with it. Miracle number two, the Arabs didn't appear. When the UN convoy said to the Jewish people in that meeting, they said, what declaration, what claim, what rights do you have to the land? And Ben Gurion held up his Tanakh and he said, we don't need any other deed other than the Torah, our historic right to the land. The Bible declares that it's the land of the Jews. And that was what was impressed them so greatly that they decided to go forward with the mission of declaring the Jewish state. That was miracle number two. Miracle number three was that the Arabs disagreed with the plan. I mean, that's not such a miracle. The Arabs always disagree with anything, except for a miracle you'll see later, which is the exact opposite of that, always in our favor. If the Arabs would have agreed to the plan, then the plan at that time that was designed was much smaller and actually impossible to maintain. It was a certain area at the top of the land with a very small area cut in the middle part and then a very tiny bridge to the Negev. It would have been a matter of minutes that the Arabs could have cut off that point and all of Israel would have been divided. If the Arabs would have agreed to the plan, then the state of Israel we would have received would have been a state of Israel impossible to maintain. But miracle number 3, the Arabs disagreed with the plan. That was Hashkacha Pratis to enable us to get that state. Miracle number 4 was the vote. The vote on Kaftet November, the 29th of November of that same year. Suddenly everything's moving very forward. April, June, already they came. November, we're ready for the vote. And the vote, they already set it up against our favor. In order to win, we needed 2/3 of the votes. Now, 2/3 of the votes means that you've got all the Arab countries there as well. They're obviously not going to vote in favor of us. It means that aside from the Arab countries, we need pretty much every single vote of every single country aside from that. Now, Britain had already declared they were not voting for us because Britain was upset with us for fighting against them for declaring our state. So Britain's against, and they instructed also all the countries that were underneath Britain, which at that time included Canada, included New Zealand, included Australia, included South Africa. They were all told not to vote or to follow in view with Britain and not vote in favor of the Jewish nation. So point number 1. So it was basically impossible for us to do that. Point number 2, Christianity was against the state. Christianity believed that it was a great affront to Christianity. If the Jews return, it means the whole of Christianity is uprooted because we're the despised nation. So all the Christian states were also against. And the last point that was against us was that America and USSR were at war. There was no way in the world they would agree to anything. If one side would agree, the other side would disagree, just to spite the first side. All of those things turned in our favor. And all the countries under Britain, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa, all voted in favor of the Jewish nation. With tremendous hashkacha of Rabbi Soloveitchik in America, speaking to a very, very high Christian authority, all the South American Christian states all voted in favor. And America, seeing Israel as a democratic state, and the USSR seeing Israel as a communist state, both voted in favor of Israel. It was impossible to be created with all those differing of views, and we had the majority view. 33 against 13, with a lot of abstainees as well. And therefore, the miracle number 4 was the fact that we won. Am Yisrael Chai. The Apostle says, Netzach Yisrael lo yishaker, the time when the 3 oaths that the Gemara in the end of Ksuvah speaks about, that Am Yisrael can only go up to Eretz Yisrael with the permission of the non-Jews, at a time where logically the non-Jews should not have agreed for us to go up. They agreed for us to go up, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu did a nace, and we were able to get their permission to go up. Now that day started a civil war, a 5-month civil war of the Arabs against the Jews. The moment the Arabs heard the plan was passed, the Arabs went to war against Am Yisrael. Now Britain, in this context, Yamach Shamam, they sided with the Arabs. And they stopped any immigration to Israel of anyone who wanted to help. They deported tens of thousands of Jews, most of whom were Holocaust survivors, who came to help the Israel state, whilst at the same time leaving the borders totally open to all the Arab armies coming from other countries, coming from Iraq, coming from Sudan, coming from Yemen, coming from Arab countries to come in and already infiltrate the country. So when the declaration will take place, all those Arab armies are already inside the state. They let thousands and thousands of Arab soldiers in and deported all the Jews. They were extremely strict to the point where they were murdering Jews in Akko, in the prison in Akko, if they were found with weapons. And they went against the rules of having weapons. Jews were in the state not allowed to have weapons, not allowed to have any immigration in preparation for the state being declared. Arabs were allowed free weaponry, free arms to come in. And armies were marching in against the Jews. The British also sided with the Arabs in other ways. There were British forces who physically shot against Jews when Jews tried to protect other Jews. The most extreme example of this was the following. Mount Scopus had the hospital Hadassah and had the university on Mount Scopus. And that was somewhat cut off. And in order to get there, they had to have a convoy. The Arabs attacked a convoy of just over 80 professors and doctors who were coming back from Mount Scopus. The British, not only did they not come to protect the Jews, but they stood guard to ensure that the Haganah would not be able to come protect the Jews. And they allowed for 6 hours all the Arabs to come up, and 78 Jewish professors and doctors were massacred on that road from Mount Scopus coming back into main Yerushalaim. The British stood there and shot live ammunition at any Haganah who came to protect, and allowed the Arabs to kill freely all the Jews. That was the most extreme example, but there were many examples of where the British were fighting together with the Arabs against the Jews. So right now, the miracles are very much against us. Now, this is inexplainable, but every country in the world, including America, made an arms embargo against Israel. It's hard to understand what they were thinking. Well, on the one hand, they were saying you can form a state, but they were also saying that you're not allowed to arm yourself in any way. It was forbidden for any country, according to the international law at that time, to send any weaponry to Israel. And we'll see in a minute the statistics, but they were setting us up for mass massacre, where Arabs were allowed freely to bring in, but there was no problems with money. All the Jews around the world were willing to send money, to send arms to the Jewish nation who were in the country at the time. It was a question of policy. The entire world made an embargo against Israel, not allowing any arms into the country. Until that point, we were only on defense. And then Israel realized that if we remain on defense, we're going to lose. And the greatest defense is an offense. The reason that this took place was Yerushalaim was already under siege. Yerushalaim was surrounded on all sides, and there was 100,000 Jews who were in Yerushalaim without food, water, gas, and certainly not weapons. The only road up to Yerushalaim was in roughly where the road to Yerushalaim is now. The hills that overlooked that road were filled with Arabs, some locals, some of the armies who had infiltrated, and every time Jews tried to come up that road, they were attacked. Jews didn't have tanks, they didn't have jeeps, they had nothing to protect themselves. They were taking regular cars and putting big steel irons in order to try and protect their own cars in order to enter Yerushalaim and break the siege. Hundreds and hundreds of Jews were killed on that road, until eventually 1,500 Palmach members, which was half of the entire Palmach force, to understand we didn't have an army. We were groups of fighters trying to get our act together in order to protect our own people. Took over the hills. They took over the hills, and they enabled a free flow in order to bring weapons and no weapons, food and medicine in order to the Jews who were under siege in Yerushalayim. Now here is a tremendous hashgacha pratis, which is not the turning point, but we'll see later in the story, became a major turning point in the story. There was a town just west of Yerushalayim, an Arab town called Dir Yassin. Dir Yassin was one of the most fierce towns from which Arab terrorists were coming out and shooting the Jews and killing Jews. I'm not going to go into all the details, but there were different Jewish forces who were fighting at the time. One of them was called the Etza, which was under Menachem Begin. They were more forceful than other forces. They went into Dir Yassin in order to wipe out the terrorists who were there, and they fought man-to-man battle, and they won the battle there, and they killed between 120 and 250 Arabs at the time. I don't know exactly, many of whom were the terrorists who had come in from other countries, some were local residents. Now the Arabs, when they attack and kill Jews, and that's called freedom fighters, and when we attack them, they called it an invasion. And the Arabs took that story, and they grossly exaggerated everything that happened. They spoke of mass murder, they spoke of rape, they spoke of pillage, they spoke of terrible things. And they used that as a media ploy in order to show how really they're the victims, and they spread that message. Now, that sounds like it's bad for us, but actually that was one of the factors that enabled us to win the war. It was an unintended effect, but it caused tremendous hashgacha, the following event to take place. All the other Arabs who were in Israel at the time, when they heard that story of a massacre of the entire town and rape and pillage and terrible things, HaKadosh Baruch Hu put fear and panic into their hearts through the story that the Arabs themselves made up and fabricated. We're going to see as we go on in the story the numbers, but when eventually the war took place, which is going to be a few weeks later, right now it's still a civil war because Israel wasn't yet declared at this point, the Arabs left en masse, ran away in panic, and left us towns and towns that we didn't have to fight for. We just had to enter and come close. And because the story that the Arabs themselves made up and fabricated, it gave the hashkacha pratis, a fear and panic in their hearts. Now the Jews tried to take offense, but unfortunately, most of the offense we were taking was not successful. I just want to, in order to explain the miracle that took place, I just want to give numbers now. These are the numbers, the lineup of numbers of what Jews and Arabs had at the beginning of the war. If it wasn't real, it would be joke. It would be a joke. You would read these numbers and you would say, that's funny. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu did it in order to show that it was not the force of the Jewish nation down in this world, but rather it was the hashkacha pratis mimal. He did it in order to show that if you put in the minimal amount of effort in this world, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will come towards you thousands-fold and show that He is the one who is doing the miracle. The miracle of Hanukkah, difficult to say what was great. The Arabs had 50 tanks, 50 tanks. The Jews had 1 against 50. That's 2%. That's one of the best statistics on this list. Armed vehicles. The Arabs had 200. The Jews had 2. That's 1 to 100. We're getting worse now. Field guns. The Arabs had 140 field guns. The Jews had 5. 5 is like one house, one family to protect themselves. Anti-aircraft guns. The Arabs had 220. The Jews had 24. 1 to 10 ratio there. That was one of the best ones. Now, that was a joke, but the next 2 things are impossible. They're just impossible. They make the whole story impossible. Air Force. What was the Air Force of the Arabs beginning the war, and what was the Jews? The Arabs had 60 fighter planes. Fighter planes, 60. And let's try and do the ratio here. You ready for this? How many did Israel have? 0. 0 means that there's no way of doing a relationship. It's infinitely greater. 60 versus 0. And again, bomber planes. Bomber planes, the Arab had 14. The Jews had 0. Now understand what this means. The Jews are sitting in Tel Aviv. A bomber plane comes in, there's nothing we can do. We have no force in the air. There's no way we can stop them. And if you tell me, but didn't you mention we had 24 anti-aircraft guns? It's true, we had. Let's say you try and use those against 60 planes. And where are they based? Are they in the north, against Lebanon and Syria? Are they against Iraq? Are they against Jordan? Or are they against Egypt? We're being attacked from 5 different fronts. Where are you going to put your weapons exactly? Where are you going to take your 2 armed vehicles and your 1 tank? Which front are you going to put it on in order to fight? HaKadosh Baruch Hu's message to us, this is going to be our major messages. We put in a minimum ishtadlus, HaKadosh Baruch Hu does the rest. Netzach Yisrael lo yeshaker. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to come towards us. But we have to always show HaKadosh Baruch Hu that we're willing, that we care, that we want to fight the fight. We show HaKadosh Baruch Hu we're devoted to Him. Really the rest is a joke. Really the rest is laughable. And that's not only true in this story, it's true in all of Avodas Hashem. It's true in all of life. The fact that we can advance in Avodas Hashem is a joke. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu is with us. The Gemara says in Kiddushin that you can't defeat the Yetzer Hara. You can't defeat him, he's stronger than you. But because you have HaKadosh Baruch Hu helping you, you're able to fight the fight. So why do you even begin? If the Gemara says the Yetzer Hara is strong enough, why do you begin? To show HaKadosh Baruch Hu that you're willing to put in the Hishtadlus. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, okay, I saw you do the Hishtadlus, you do the rest. Which means that it doesn't have to be logical. Your Hishtadlus in this world does not have to be logical. It's not about the success, it's about the Hishtadlus. In the Israeli wars, we don't look at how we're going to be successful. We look at what our next stage in Hishtadlus to take. The fight against the Yetzer Hara, the fight against the Arabs, is the same thing. It doesn't have to be that you see the final result, because it's not about how you're going to achieve the final result. It's about you showing that you're willing and that you want to put in the fight. Let's continue the Nisim that took place. Okay, just going back to that last point that I said, I'll just finish it now. The idea that we said, the one before this of Dir Yassin, the fear in the hearts of the Arabs, and they ran away. I'll just give you the statistics on that. 9 days later, after Dir Yassin, the Jews approached Tveria. The entire Arab population of Tveria ran away to Syria and Lebanon. 4 days later, the Jews approached Haifa. The entire Arab population fled to Lebanon. And we were telling them to stay. We were saying, stay, don't leave, we're not going to kill you. But they ran away after hearing the reports of Dir Yassin to Lebanon. And the greatest one was Yaffo, was the largest Arab town in Israel at the time. 80,000 residents. We came to Yaffo, 80,000 people ran away to Egypt, to Gaza, to Lebanon, to Syria. Every direction they fled. Ma'at agarashenu mipanecha. HaKadosh Baruch Hu did it slowly but surely. Ad asher tifre v'nachalta at haaretz. HaKadosh Baruch Hu stage by stage enabled us to come and just appear. And they ran away. And why did they do that? HaKadosh Baruch Hu put pachad, aimer in their hearts after a story they made up and they fabricated. Chasdei Hashem Yisrael. Another miracle that takes place. It's impossible. If you put all these miracles, it's an impossible story. If someone would write a novel of the stories that took place at the beginning of the state of Israel, they would say it's unrealistic. No one's going to buy that book. It's unrealistic. And if they would do a sequence novel with 1967, they would say, you've lost your mind. No one's going to read this. It's an impossible story. Because we have a Kadosh Baruch Hu behind us. It's not impossible. It is impossible. It's impossible. But we have Hashem. Hashem can do miracles. Next miracle. America and the UN strongly put pressure on Am Yisrael to push off the declaration of the state. And on the 3rd of Iyar, there was a meeting that took place of 10 people later on who were all very, very public figures. And they had to decide whether they were going to go through with it or not. And the foreign minister to be, Moshe Sharet, who had just come back from America, said, if we do it, we won't have the backing of America. We won't have the backing. We're not going to have the backing of other countries. We're going to go totally alone. And basically, if you go through with declaring the state, you'll bring a second Holocaust to Israel. Because statistically, there is no way we can win. There is no way we can win this war. And they started having a 13-hour consecutive debate about whether to declare the state or not. America and UN putting pressure not to declare at that point, and Israel saying it's a golden opportunity, don't take it. And within Israel saying, but we'll lose. We have no chance. There's no way. They went to vote, and it was 6 against 4. 6 against 4, meaning one vote tipped the difference. If one person of the 6 would have said no, it would have been 5-5, take it. I'm not sure what they would have done. They probably would have put it on hold. They would have said, Shevi al Tasa, take it. One extra vote, 6 against 4, they went ahead with the decision. It was as if the light of the Mashiach was coming. The Mashiach ben Yosef was just pushing them at each stage. Okay, do it. Just do it. You're not sure, I know you're not sure, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu is sure, so he tipped us over to make us make that decision. Now, the declaration of the state was supposed to take place on Shabbos, on the 6th of Iyar. Yom Haatzmaut was supposed to be the day that we're now speaking on in Israel, Vav Iyar. But the state of Israel founded in Kedusha. They said if they founded on Friday night at 12 midnight when it was supposed to be given over to Israel, there will be Chilul Shabbos. And they wanted an achdus of all of the nations together. On the scroll of independence is signed, as well as all the left-wing parties, is signed the religious parties, the Agudas Yisrael, the Poale Agudas Yisrael. They wanted every faction of the Jewish nation to be together. In my mind, that's the biggest miracle. The fact that Jews from all different spectrums can come together and sign on one document and agree to one thing together. In order that there wouldn't be Chilul Shabbos, they brought the announcement hours earlier that it will be on Friday, in order that there won't be Chilul Shabbos, to found the state on Kedusha, a miracle in and of itself. Another miracle, the Arabs were all alert and fresh. They hadn't been fighting. A small group had been fighting for the last 5 months in a civil war, but the thousands of armies who had come in to the fight from within were alive and fresh and alert. We'd just been 5 months of fighting, burying, great losses of our brothers. Another miracle. We were empty-handed, like we spoke about just a moment ago, with all the tanks and weapons versus us. Another miracle, the population. There were 50 Arabs for every Jew. 50 Arabs for every Jew. And amongst the Jews that we have, a third of them are Holocaust survivors. Who has the koch to go and fight after just going to the Holocaust? Financial resources. They had the entire Arab world backing them. We were in embargo. No one was coming and able to support us, to bring us in. Mysterious nefesh, hashkacha protis. Now we're going to the story itself. The first 4 weeks were tragedy and disaster on every front of the Jewish nation. It was as if HaKadosh Baruch Hu was saying, I just want you to realize that it's Yad Hashem. It's only Yad Hashem. Because if you try and do this naturally, it's impossible to work. Let's try and go on the natural level. This is what happened in the first 4 weeks. Egypt invaded from the south. They reached Ashdod. Ad Halom, Summit Ad Halom, which is the south entrance to Ashdod, that's where they reached. That's 32 kilometers from Tel Aviv, which means that it will take them 1 day to get to Tel Aviv, nothing stopping them coming, and there's no one to stop them to go all the way through. Egypt also went all the way east, Hebron, Beersheba, Ramat Rachel. They conquered the entire breadth of the country, which cut off the entire Negev. All the Negev communities were entirely cut off. This is before the war starts. They've already entered the first 4 weeks, they come in, they're entirely conquered the entire area. They've got the coast, they've got all the way through to Ramat Rachel. That's Egypt. Jordan has entered, surrounded Yerushalaim entirely, put Yerushalaim in siege, continued and captured Lod, which means the airport, which means no one can come in or go out. The first 4 weeks, the airport was captured. Iraq comes in. Iraq comes in and is standing on the entire Shomron. They're standing at the gate of Rosh Ha'ayin, of Petach Tikva, of Hadera, of Netanya. They are 10 kilometers from Iraq to the sea, which means that one more push, 10 kilometers is 4 or 5 hours in army terms, one more push, and they've got the sea, they've cut off the entire north. Lebanon has come down, conquered the entire Upper Galil. Syria has come in and taken Somet Tzemach. That's cut off Tveria. So you have Tveria cut off. You have the Galil already captured. You have Yerushalaim surrounded, an entire coastal plain, 10 kilometers, all of Iraq. You have the entire breadth of the country cut off by Egypt and nothing holding them back. We went on offense to try and defend ourselves. Every offense that we did, we lost. We went to Somet Latrun to try and break through the Matzor, the siege on Yerushalaim, because Latrun was the point which they had the siege. We went through. First time failed, second time failed, third time failed, hundreds of soldiers were killed. We tried in the north to open the Tzomet Tzemach where Tveria was being blocked, and that way get an entry to the Galil. We came there, twice, failed. We went every single mitzvah that we tried to do at that time, failed. Egypt, we tried to attract 1, 2, 3 times, failed. That was Pileshet was called that mitzvah. Everything failed. We lost hundreds of soldiers in those first 4 weeks, 1,000 soldiers in those first 4 weeks. Most of the ammunition that we had, we lost at that point. And now there was nothing holding them back. If they would have taken a half a day to keep fighting, they would have entirely won the battle and there would have been nothing to stop them. A half a day, Egypt would be at Tel Aviv. All of Iraq would have gone to the coast and wiped out the Jews. The Galil was already captured. Jordan would just have closed in the siege and conquered Yerushalaim. A half a day was all it took for them to go in. What happens next? The UN approached both sides and said, we were thinking of having a 28-day ceasefire. What do you think? The Jewish people say, please, we need it. The Arabs, who always have a policy of denying anything Jewish, like we saw earlier when the King David meeting took place, they boycott the meeting. Anytime any Jew says anything, they say, no, on our blood. The Arabs, who are about to win, within a half a day, they could win the entire war and there's nothing to hold them back. The Arabs say, we agree. As if they were the beaten ones, as if they were the defeated ones, they agreed to a 28-day ceasefire. That was the turning point of the war. That was the great miracle that turned everything around. It was, as the Pasuk says, Vayakeim Hashem b'sanverim, and Hashem struck them with blindness. Could they not see in a half a day they would win the war? 28-day ceasefire. That 28 days turned everything around. One thing that it turned around was Czechoslovakia broke the embargo secretively and illegally, and they started sending weapons to Israel. Amongst the things they sent was planes. They sent 4 planes. 4 planes. Now those 4 planes hadn't been tested if they worked. They came to Tel Nof, right over here in Kiryat Yavne, 10 kilometers away. If you ever hear planes in Kiryat Yavne, it's from Tel Nof Army Base. They came to Tel Nof, and there wasn't time to even do one flight to check if everything worked. 4 pilots took the air. Hold that thought. That's one miracle that took place. We'll get back to that. Now let's talk about the road to Yerushalaim. Just before the ceasefire took effect, there was a soldier called Moshe who had came on a jeep to the Etzel headquarters from Yerushalaim. And they said, Moshe, where did you come from? I said, I came from Yerushalayim. They said, how? There's a siege. The road is closed. He said, I discovered a new road. There was an ancient road based on Tanakh that they recognized was a path that the Avos used to take, not Avos, but the Olel Arel used to take. He discovered this path. This path, everyone who has ever been on NCSY Kollel knows, because it's the road that goes through Beit Meir. That's the road they discovered. They opened that road. When the ceasefire, 10 days and nights, they worked on that road. When the ceasefire took effect, there was a fully open road, which was given approval by the UN. That was totally within the Israel area, and there was no barricade, and because of the ceasefire, they couldn't barricade it. Water, food, medicine was taken into Yerushalayim. It saved the lives of tens of thousands of people just momentarily, never mind the war, just because of food and medicine, it saved their lives. Now, part of the agreement was that you couldn't bring weapons. The road split into two. The lower part of the road went through Sharagai, where the road is today. The higher part of the road went exactly through Beit Meir. The lower part of the road was being checked by the UN. The higher part of the road was not being checked by the UN. The Jewish people brought weapons, the little that they had, and that was sent now by Czechoslovakia to the break point. The food and medicine went down, the weapons went up, past the UN checking point, met again, entered Yerushalayim. They brought food, medicine, water, and weapons into Yerushalayim. That's miracle number 2. By the time the 28 days had passed, the situation was exactly the same. The Arabs still held the exact same points they held. The Jews still held the same points they held. But the difference was we had recovered from exhaustion, and we now had weapons. And when I say weapons, we didn't have so much still. But you will see what great miracle. The weapons that don't even work. Weapons that don't even work. Yad Hashem is what changed the miracle around. Let's talk about Egypt first. In Egypt, the Jewish people took from Tel Nof flight with 4 aeroplanes. Of those 4 aeroplanes, they did no damage and killed not one soldier. And in fact, one overseas English-speaking pilot who came to defend the land of Israel, Eddie Cohen, his plane crashed because the planes hadn't been checked. His plane crashed. They did no damage, and they killed no soldier. But when the Egyptians saw those airplanes, they froze. They froze. The Israeli army is well known to la'alter. So you have one plan, you change your plan immediately. The other armies, when they have a plan and the plan doesn't go according to plan, they don't know what to do. HaKadosh Baruch Hu froze them in their place. There was nothing holding them back. The 4 airplanes that were pathetic that we had couldn't shoot. They couldn't shoot. They couldn't do anything. They just flew over Ashdod. And when the Egyptian forces saw them, they said, oh, what do we do now? Nothing happened. They didn't shoot. They just flew. And Egypt stopped in their tracks. That put them on hold. In the north, and we spoke about this on the Shabbat when we went to Tzvat, there was this little cannon which didn't work. It didn't work. It was called the Little Napoleon, and we renamed it the Davidson. All it did was make a noise. That's all it did. And in Somet Tzemach and in Tzvat, all the Jews did was light it, and it made a big boom, and all the Arabs ran away. It's unbelievable. HaKadosh Baruch Hu with Yad Hashem said, now the Geula is ready to come. I see that you've been willing to fight ad Mesiras Nefesh. Now you will see that it will be Yad Hashem that will win this war. And without weapons that even work, HaKadosh Baruch Hu turned the whole war around. At that point, we took offense. We started fighting. And it was as if HaKadosh Baruch Hu enabled us to win the war without any offense. There was offense. And in truth be told, there were another 5,000 soldiers that were killed, Jews that were killed, more than in the first 4 weeks. But we saw success after success at every place that we touched. In the south, we managed to force the Egyptians back. We managed to force the Jordanians back. We forced the Iraqis back, the Lebanese back, the Syrians back. We forced everyone back. Now, the original plan that we had agreed to in order to make one step forward, did not include many areas. And the new war that we fought expanded the borders over 50%. We went so far as to go all the way through Sinai. We took Sinai. And then the British started bombing us. And when the British started bombing us, we still were out of weapons. We started shooting at the British from below and took out 5 British planes. When the British realized that God was with us, they said, okay, we can't fight you, so we're going to threaten you. And they said, if you don't stop fighting and if you don't return Sinai, then we're going to start bombing Tel Aviv. And we made a mistake at that point and we agreed, and we gave back, we had Sinai. It's Nesim v'niflaos what took place at that time. So after the first 4 weeks where everything went wrong, here was the turning point where everything went correct. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was with us at that point. That road is called the Burma Road. Those 10 days after the 28 days ceasefire, those 10 days is what totally transformed the entire war. 2 more short miracles I just want to say, and then I want to come to the Al-Pisod idea that I wanted to discuss. If the state would have been founded at that time, like that, if the Arabs would have briefed the state and they would have been fighting, there would have been a vast Arab majority in the state. Because of all the Arabs fleeing, all the Arabs who ran away caused there to be 90% Jewish when the state was founded, and that way we were able to found the state in a positive way. That week's parsha was Parshas B'chukosai. The week when those 4 planes flew over Egypt, over Ashdod, where the Egyptians were, and what froze them was the parsha in which we read, Uradaftem et oyevechem, and you will chase off your enemies, v'naflu lifnechem l'charev. It was that week's parsha, we read that, and it was fulfilled. So the major message that we shared today in the telling of this story, which is from Hashkacha Pratis message, was that we put in our hashtadlus, HaKadosh Baruch Hu does the rest. In each stage of this war, you can see how logically it did not make sense, and it was impossible for it to happen. But in each stage, HaKadosh Baruch Hu came towards us and He enabled the war to take place. Now, in order to give a gespanka, in order to give a seal and show how this is Yad Hashem, we're going to learn together Chumash. There's an idea which some people are aware of, many are not. And when you learn this idea, it transforms your entire perspective. And you see Nevuah coming directly out of the Psukim. I learned this idea from a rabbi in America, Rabbi Binyamin Blythe from YU. In one of his Svarim, he writes this idea. And I checked it, and it's unbelievable. If it wasn't explicit in the Torah, it would be as unbelievable as the Nisim that we just described that took place. Binyamin Blythe came with his community to Tzvat. And there's a Makubal in Tzvat who is anonymous. He remains hidden. The people in Tzvat know him, but they consider him to be one of the Lamed Vav hidden tzaddikim. And Rav Blythe had heard there's such a tzaddik there, but he didn't know who he was or how to meet him. But through Hashkacha they met. And this hidden tzaddik said to him, I know you're a man of influence. I need to tell you a secret because I know that it will transform the way that you will instruct your community and the people that you teach. But I'm only going to tell it to you on 2 conditions. Condition number 1, that you don't reveal it until I tell you you're allowed to. Condition number 2, that you never, even when you do reveal it, you never say that you heard it from me because I wish to remain anonymous. Rabbi Blythe accepted those 2 conditions, and he heard the deepest secret he'd ever heard, which transformed his perspective of Avodas Hashem for the future. That's what he writes in his book. For years he didn't tell it to anyone, until one day he got a message from this rabbi via someone who came to America that you're allowed to tell the secret now. And that secret he writes in his book, and we're going to share it today. It's called, in Hebrew, the Sod HaMishpatim. The Sod HaMishpatim says that major events in Jewish history are sometimes explicitly and sometimes implicitly alluded to in the pasuk of the Torah that aligns itself with that year. When Rav Blythe said that, heard that from the rabbi, it sounded too unreal to be true, and he said, could you give me an example? So he said, this rabbi said, the nace of the foundation of the state was the turning point where HaKadosh Baruch Hu took us out of Galus and ended us into the stage of the Geula. The Geula has not yet been completed, but it's the turning point from which HaKadosh Baruch Hu is returning. And that is written explicitly on the year in the Pasuk that corresponds to 1948. Now, if you wish, in your own time, to count from the beginning, 5,708 Psukim, then this is the Pasuk that you will arrive at. Devarim Kaf Tet Kaf Bet. You're welcome to open your Chumashim together with me. We'll read it together. This is exactly the year that corresponds. So Kaf Tet, Lamed Gimel. Lamed/Gimel. The other ones we'll get to in a second. Lamed Gimel. This is the exact pasuk. That is the pasuk in the Torah which corresponds with 1948, 5,708 psukim. It could not be a more appropriate pasuk to see HaKadosh Baruch Hu revealing Himself in the world. This is the pasuk. V'shav Adonai Elohecha et shvutecha v'richamecha v'shav v'kibetzecha mikol ha'amim asher hefitzecha Adonai Elohecha shama. And Hashem will return the returnings, and He will have mercy on you, and He will return, and He will gather you in from all the nations that He has spread you out to there. The reason why the Galut took place, and the day that HaKadosh Baruch Hu determines to return the Jewish people to their home, is a day that Hashem will be forgiven for our sins, and He's forgiven us, and He loves us, and it's time for us to return. That year that pasuk took place was 1948. It's so unbelievable that the emotions start welling up within you and the tears come to the eyes. V'shav Hashem Elokecha et shvutecha v'richamecha v'shav v'kibetzecha mikol ha'amim asher hefitzecha Adonai Elohecha shama. When Rabbi Blash heard that, he said, Rabbi, it blows me away, but maybe it's a fluke. Maybe it's just, it happens to be, things happen. Maybe just then. So the rabbi said, so what would you like to look up? So Rabbi Blash says, I want to look up the Holocaust. So he says, so let's go back to the Holocaust. And Rabbi Blash himself, sitting with that rabbi, started counting back, Psukim, to get to the beginning of the Holocaust. The year that responds to 1939. Sorry. V'amar ador acharon, asher yakumu acharechem, makot haaretz hahi, תחלואיה אשר חילה אדוני בה, גופרית ומלח, שריפה כל ארצה, לא תזרע, לא תצמח ולא יעלה עשב, כמהפכת סדום ועמורה, אדמה וצבועים אשר הפך אדוני באפו ובחמותו. It will be like Sodom ועמורה. Hashem will turn His anger against you, He will turn you over. ויאמרו כל הגויים, מה עשה אדוני כך על הארץ? Why is Hashem doing all this? What is this great anger that Hashem is doing to us? Why is it happening? And they will say, that's the years of the beginning of the Holocaust. When Rabbi Binyamin Rash wrote that, he said he was speechless. He was paralyzed in his place. He couldn't believe it. And then the question that he had been asking himself for all the years of the Holocaust, what is HaKadosh Baruch Hu's answer? Why did the Holocaust take place? How are we supposed to respond? And he went into the year that ends the pasuk, the year before the ending of the pasuk. V'yichar af Adonai kol haklala kutuva b'sefer hazeh. The second last year of the Holocaust. Every curse that appears in the Torah, that's the pasuk in the Torah. The second last year of the Holocaust. The pasuk in the Torah says that Hashem will bring upon us every curse in the Torah. What is the pasuk of the ending of the Holocaust? The pasuk that parallels 1945-6, the year that the Holocaust ended. What is our response supposed to be? Hanistarot ladonai Eloheinu, v'haniglot lanu levaneinu ad olam, lasot et divrei Torah hazot. That's the year of the end of the Holocaust. Don't ask questions on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. These things are concealed. Only HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows why these things happen. We have a message to continue, lanu levanenu, to continue the future, lasot kol divrei Torah, to continue fulfilling the words of Hashem, to fulfill the mitzvot of Hashem. That is what Hashem's instruction of how we are to continue after the continuation of the Holocaust takes place. Now, Rabbi Bleich writes this before 1967. He didn't continue and make the parallel of 1967. But I did. And I started reading 19 psukim later. If it wasn't enough that the Holocaust is written explicitly that it's Yad Hashem, and what our response to the Holocaust is supposed to be, and that the state is HaKadosh Baruch Hu loving us and returning us to the land. When you read 20 psukim later, and you get to pasuk Lamed Gimel, Lamed Aleph, pasuk Gimel, Adonai Elohecha, Hu over lefanecha, Hu yashmid et hagoyim ha'ele milefanecha, v'yirishtam. God, our God, He will go before us. He will wipe out all the goyim in front of us, and you will conquer the land. That is the pasuk that corresponds to the year 1968, as we finish the year of the Six-Day War. Kadosh Baruch Hu, 5,700 years before that event took place, already told us there will be challenging times, and He told us not to ask questions against Him, and He told us that He will return us to the land, and He told us that He will be ahead of us in order to conquer all the holy places of Eretz Yisrael, Yerushalaim. Now I'm ending there because in my mind that is the most powerful thing we could end with, to see that we put in a minimum amount of ishtadlus, and a Kodesh Baruch Hu written explicitly in the Psukim comes towards us thousands of times fold. But in order just to see how it affects us in our days as well, after I read that, and just a few hours ago, I wondered to myself if Corona was alluded to in our year. I'm leaving it to you. Look up the pasuk which parallels our year. Look up Rashi's commentary on that pasuk. He gives 3 interpretations, and look at the middle one. And if you look at the middle interpretation of Rashi on the year that corresponds to this year, you will see explicitly written an allusion. But if you know it's Corona, you know that that's what he's speaking about. In the middle of the 3 commentaries of Rashi there. And you see that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was with us at every step of the way, loving us, caring for us. And this is the day that we can praise Hashem and thank Hashem, not just for the details of the war of being saved, but for returning us to Eretz Yisrael, for ending the stage of the Galus, for beginning the stage of the Geula, showing us that He loves us and He is devoted to us. And may we be zochra that the Geula Shlema should become speedily in our days.